Welcome to video lecture series of design of steel structures. So in the previous video up till now we have seen various members subjected to certain actually applied loads, that is actually applied tension load or actually applied compression member, correct. So these particular members we have designed using your tension member design analysis or compression member design analysis, and the common factor in this design was the load was applied on your section which was longitudinally parallel to your longitudinal axis and the load was axial one. So in this particular unit number 4th, we are going to deal with flexural members or beam members. So the difference between the first two, that is tension and compression members, and your third flexural members is that is load action or the external load acting on your section. Here the load is going to act perpendicular to the longitudinal axis of members, correct. So usually in many industrial structure, horizontal members are provided which are carrying load from your roofs and they are transferring these loads to your column section as a compression. So these horizontal members are termed as your flexural members or beam members, and depending upon the restraint provided to the compression flange or top flange of your section, they are classified into two basic categories, that is laterally supported and laterally unsupported. This particular flexural member or design of member subject to do bending is as per section 8 of IS 800 2007. So one by one we'll see that. So here in introduction to flexural members, initially a structural member subjected to transverse load, that is the load applied perpendicular to longitudinal axis of member. So in this particular figure you can observe that this particular is a square cross section having certain length L, and the axis along the longitudinal side or along the length of your section, this red color section is nothing but this is your longitudinal axis. So when external 2-point loads I have shown, when two external points load are acting exactly perpendicular to longitudinal axis of your member, the member is termed as your flexural member or beam member. These members are placed usually horizontal and subjected to vertical loading. So in this case you can understand this is the horizontal member which is subjected to certain vertical loads, and these are commonly called as your beam sections. So usually in case of reinforced concrete structures, these are defined as your beam sections, but in case of your steel structures or industrial buildings, various terms are adapted for your flexural members or beam members. So one by one we are going to see that terms. So initially the load transfer mechanism is due to bending and shear. So here the load taking capacity of these flexural sections is because of bending of section and shear capacity of your section. So when a member used in the building to support your roof load, it's called as your joist. So in the adjacent figure you can understand this particular is your joist which is support, these particulars are your joist which are supported by your bearers, correct. So in short these bearers are going to take load of all the joists, and joist is going to be subjected to certain light loading compared with your bearers. So members supporting number of joints are generally called as your girders, or they are termed as your bearers. So member carrying roof load and roof covering material are generally called as your purlins. So here you can see that these are your purlins. Always purlins are running parallel to your length of shed, correct, and these are your number of truss. So your purling is supported by your number of trusses. So in short your spacing of truss is nothing but it is your length of purling, and these purlins are taking the load of roof covering material, that may be either your GI sheets or your asbestos or AC sheets, correct. Member carrying load above the opening is called as your lintel. So already this particular part you have covered at your second year level in BTM. And stringers are the members in bridge aligned in the direction of traffic. So usually if this particular beam section is used for your bridges, steel structure bridges, these are termed as your stringers. So we have seen examples of joist, girder, purlins, lintels and stringers. Here you need to understand the concept of load application. For all these particular examples, the load is going to act exactly perpendicular to the longitudinal axis. And in the previous units, that is unit for your first unit we have seen in tension member, second unit we have seen in compression member, where your load was applied along the direction of your longitudinal axis, either it was towards your member as a compression or away from the member acting as a tension. So here load is neither axial load, correct, it is acting at your transfer direction of longitudinal axis. So because of that action your member is going to bend along the length. So the bending nature is going to be likewise sagging type of bending moment for this given loading is observed in case of your flexural members. Now, as per the lateral restraint provided to your compression flange, these particular beams are classified into two basic categories: laterally supported beams and laterally unsupported beams. So if you consider example of simply supported beam subjected to certain loading along the length, suppose we will consider example of uniformly distributed load acting on a beam. So for a sagging bending moment, your top compression flange will be subjected to compressive load and bottom compression flange will be subjected to tension load. So if that particular compression flange is having certain lateral stability in order to buckle or lateral stability against buckling, that particular beams are classified as laterally supported type of beams. A beam may be assumed to be adequately supported at the support provided the compression flange has full restraint and nominal torsional restraint at the support supplied by the web cleats or partial depth or plates or fin plates or continuity with the adjacent span are coming under the category of laterally supported type of beams. In the figure you can understand here, suppose this is your tension flange and this top side is your compression flange. Similar, all top side are your compression flange and bottom side are your tension flange. If the lateral torsional buckling along this side or this side is restrained with the help of this concrete slab at the top side, or some shear connectors are shown, or there may be such kind of X kind of bracing system which is restraining your lateral torsional buckling, are coming under the category of laterally supported type of beams. And if such kind of lateral restraint is not provided for this compression flange, it is coming under laterally unsupported type of beams. So in short, lateral torsional buckling is possible for laterally unsupported and lateral torsional buckling is restrained for laterally supported type of beams. So few examples are here. Floor slabs, floor beams or bracing system are the examples of lateral restraints. Such type of restraints is not as possible in case of laterally unsupported one. Then next we are going to see design of laterally supported beams as per IS 800 2007. So initially starting with the effective span clause, clause number 8.8.1, distance between the centers of support or it is length between the assumed lines of reactions. So that is to be considered as the effective length for your beam. So in short, suppose if you consider example of width of support equal to B on both the sides, in that cases clear distance, that is face to face distance between the columns plus half the width from both the sides is to be considered for effective length calculation. So in short, effective length is nothing but clear distance plus one width support, that is B value. Here that formula is written, effective length is nothing but clear distance plus one of the width of support, L effective. Now in case of if the load is either acting as a point load or uniformly distributed load or uniformly varying load, because of this particular loading your section is subjected to bending moment and shear force. So the bending moment and axial force acting on the section may be assumed to be resisted by flanges. So always flanges are going to carry the bending moment and the web is going to carry, or it is designed to carry, shear force only. So likewise two actions we have to understand: flanges for bending moment and a web portion for shear resistance. So this is as per clause. Now shear strength of your section as per clause 8.4. So according to clause 8.4, shear strength capacity of your section is given as, so factor design shear force, suppose V in a beam due to external action shall satisfy. So V is the maximum factored shear force acting on your section and that should satisfy design shear strength, that is VD value. So VD should be greater than V value, and in order to calculate your design shearing strength, that is VD value, it is given by VD design shear strength equals to, so that is area AV, area of web multiplied by yield strength of web FYW divided by root of 3 into gamma m0. So likewise these details are given. So initially you need to understand AV value, and AV is nothing but it is area of your web, or it is called as your shear area. Now shear area in case of rolled section is total depth into thickness of web, while in case of welded section it is only depth of web multiplied by thickness of web. So likewise two formulas you need to understand based on the type of section, whether it is a rolled section or whether it is a welded section. For rolled section you consider total depth or overall depth of section multiplied by thickness of web, and for welded section you only consider depth of web multiplied by thickness of web. So using this you can calculate the design shearing strength of your rolled section or design shearing strength of your welded section. Now this particular design shearing strength is multiplied by factor 0.6. So if the 0.6 VD value is greater than your maximum factored shear force, the condition is termed as low shear condition, and if the factored design shear force multiplied by 0.6 value exceeds maximum shear force acting on the section, that is called as your high shear condition. So likewise two conditions are to be considered. In first condition is low shear condition, in which case in low shear condition your 0.6 VD value is greater than maximum factored shear force, and for high shear condition your 0.6 VD value is less than maximum factored shear force. So if you consider example of low shear condition, in that cases according to clause 8.2.1.2 page number 53, 8.2.1.2 page number 53, for low shear condition design bending strength MD is given as beta B into plastic section modulus multiplied by yield strength Fy divided by partial safety factor gamma m0. Now here plastic section modulus is coming into picture, and that you need to understand. Section modulus is given by moment of inertia divided by y distance, which is extreme fiber distance. So that is nothing but it is your section modulus. But in case of your plastic sections, we are getting higher strength or heavier section modulus, and therefore the irregular elastic section modulus is multiplied with your shape factor in order to get your plastic section modulus. So the section is subjected to continuously loading. In that cases your yield stresses are going to achieve at certain longer deformations, and there is plastic hinge formation, due to which behavior of your cross section is a plastic, and because of that plastic behavior bending strength of the section is going to increase. So here for low shear condition design bending strength is given as beta B multiplied by Zp, that is plastic section modulus, into yield strength Fy, that is 250 divided by gamma m0, where now these two values are to be lesser than 1.2 times of elastic section modulus into Fy divided by gamma m0 for simple supports, and 1.5 times of elastic section modulus into Fy divided by gamma m0 for cantilever beams. Now coming towards this beta B factor depends upon the classification of section. So four types of classes we have seen: plastic, compact, semi-compact and slender. So based on that your beta B factor is to be considered, and that beta B factor depends upon your classification of section. So classification of section we have seen in width to thickness ratios. We have seen width to thickness ratios of the sections, and that is as per table number 2, that is limiting width to thickness ratios. Based on table number 2 page number 18 we are going to initially classify your section, and based on classification you are going to define based on the classification of section you are going to define the beta B factor. Now next is your beta B factor for plastic and compact is 1.0, and for semi compact it is elastic section modulus by plastic section modulus. Then Fy is yield strength and gamma m0 is partial safety factor. So this particular formula is to be adapted for low shear conditions. Now in case of high shear condition, when the design shear force V exceeds 0.6 VD value, the design bending strength MD shall be taken as MD equals to MDV value. Now here for MDV calculation in case of plastic or compact section, formula is given as MDV equals to regular movement MD minus beta factor into bracket MD minus MFD, which value should be less than or equal to 1.2 ZE into Fy divided by gamma m0. Now again here MD is your regular calculation, beta factor depends upon your shear force and 0.6 VD value, and MFD value. So MFD is nothing but it is plastic design strength of the area of cross section excluding the shear area considering partial safety factor gamma m0. So that details are given here. MFD is given as section modulus for your flanges multiplied by Fy divided by gamma m0. So which is given as area of flanges into bracket total depth minus thickness of flange, area of flanges into bracket total depth minus thickness of flange multiplied by Fy divided by gamma m0. So using this you need to calculate your MFD, and this MFD is nothing but this is certain reduction factor than your regular moment taking capacity. So in short, because of higher shear, your bending strength is going to reduce, and that reduction factor is multiplied in this particular second condition. So that is for your 0.6 Vd value greater than V value, that is high shear condition. Now next we are going to see what are the different checks required in case of your beam design. So initially first check is check for web buckling. So in the sketch you can understand this is your regular rolled section, and these are the different types of deflected shapes of your web. At the total depth, here you can see at the center, at the bottom side, or at the top side. So likewise buckling of your web is there. Already in classification of section we have seen that these members are a combination of different elements, and every elements may buckle locally. So likewise local failure may be there only for web, and that is coming under the category of web buckling. The web in a rolled section behaves like a column when placed under concentrated loads and reactions. As the web is in thin before subjected to buckling, web buckling strength, that is FWB, should be greater than your maximum shear force VU. So VU is standing here for ultimate factored shear force or factored shear force VU value. That should be less than your buckling strength of web. So buckling strength of web is given as B width multiplied by thickness of web into FCD. This is the formula to calculate your buckling strength. Width multiplied by strip bearing width multiplied by thickness of web into FCD. Now FCD depends upon your KL by R ratio. Now KL is effective length, and effective length is calculated as 0.7 times of your depth value, and your radius of gyration is given as under root of I by A, that is moment of inertia by A. So using that, rearranging the terms and formulating the formula, you can directly consider lambda is calculated as 2.45 times of d1 multiplied by tw. This d1 is nothing but it is the depth excluding the thickness of flange, or in steel table directly you may consider h1 value instead of d1. So lambda is given as 2.45 h1 divided by tw. Now referring table 9c, that is for calculation of FCD, you can go with calculation of FCD value, and B is given as strip bearing length. Now this strip bearing length depends upon number of dispersions. Usually suppose this top side reaction is acting on the section for a width of B value, so there is always dispersion of your force at an angle of 45 degree. So in case of reaction, dispersion is only along one side, and in case of your point loads or concentrated load, dispersion is along both the sides. So in short, if this particular depth is your D value, in that case dispersion for one side will be only D value, and for point load the dispersion will be along both the sides, that is D by 2, and so entire D value is going to be there. So here in case of strip bearing length, you can understand either the strip bearing length will be mentioned in your problem, or you may assume that value to 100 to 150 mm. So for reactions, you assume strip bearing length plus half of the depth for reactions, and strip bearing length plus one complete depth for concentrated load. As for concentrated load, dispersion is along both the sides. This is the first check required. Now in case of second check, check for web crippling. Check for web crippling. So loads and reaction concentrated along a length of flange of beam and are resisted by compressive stresses in the web. Stress concentration occurs at the junction of web and flange, and there is generally folding of your web portion above the flange at the junction. So here you can understand that phenomena. Because of external loading, here is folding of your web, and because of reaction, here is the folding of your web portion. So such kind of folding is to be checked for web crippling. For that, formula is adapted. Your bearing strength for crippling is given as Fw, and that is given as effective area into yield strength of web divided by gamma m0. Here again area effective is given as B1 multiplied by thickness of web, where B1 depends upon concentrated loads and reaction. So for concentrated loads, B1 is given as strip bearing length assumed B value plus 2 times N1, because it is dispersion along both the sides, and in case of your supports, there is dispersion only along one side, therefore N1 value. So likewise B1 equals to B plus N1 for reactions, and B plus 2 times N1 for concentrated load, where N1 is equal to 2.5 times of thickness of flange plus R1, where your TF is your thickness of flange and R1 value is nothing but it is your radius at root. So according to this principle we are going to calculate the strip bearing length, and that is given in case of on your page number 66. On page number 66 you can observe that buckling resistance for stiffener and values are given with a dispersion of 45 degrees. In that it is explained clearly to consider the value 2.5 times of your B1 value plus TF value plus your radius at root R1 value. Now last check, that is check for deflection. This is as per table number 6, page number 31. There is correction, this is not OG, it is PG, page number 31, where your deflection criteria are given. So usually beams subjected to your uniformly distributed load, or it may be subjected to your point load, and according to that two standard conditions I have discussed here. For two standard conditions, maximum deflection for acting load is given, that is WL cube by 48 EI for point load, and WL 5 WL raised to 4 upon 384 EI for your uniformly distributed load. Now in case of your section as per table 6, deflection limits are given for live load conditions for industrial building as well as for your regular building, and the range is given as for simple span it is span by 300 to span by 240, and for gantry girders it is span divided by 500. So this is the limitation for your deflection given as per your table number 6 IS 800, and actual value you need to calculate using your given loading and span value, again moment of inertias and your modulus of velocity for your section. So likewise you need to compare the values for deflection, which is going to be your last check. So in short, for design of flexural members, initially you need to calculate maximum bending moment and maximum shear force for factored loading acting on the section. For given loading, that is bending moment, you need to calculate section modulus required. For required section modulus, you need to select a section based on the elastic or plastic section modulus available in your steel table. After selecting the section, you need to classify the section whether it is plastic, compact, semi-compact or slender, and based on classification by calculation of your high shear and low shear condition, you need to determine the design bending strength for selected section. After the calculation of design bending strength, if it is satisfying the design bending strength condition, you need to go for check for web buckling, check for web crippling, and check for deflection. So likewise 5 to 6 number of steps are required for design of beams. So here in today's lecture we have discussed regarding only laterally supported type of beams. In the next video we will see some of the numericals on laterally supported, and after that we'll start with unit number 4B part, that is laterally unsupported beams. So thank you very much.